Welcome back to Quag Keep. Like I said, I'm going to have a few different spots where I'm going to start reading this stuff, and lo and behold, here's one of them. Chapter 7 Ambush. They had ridden on for an hour before they found that what Milo's second and stronger memory held as a proper place to set up their trap. A place where the riverbank sank, and there was a thicket of trees stunted by a palm wind, but still barrier enough to cover them. 7 rode into the fringe of the thicket, and 4, with the pack train, rode out again, Ingrid in the lead. Nail, Milo, and Yvel picketed their mounts under the roof of the trees and gave each a small ration of dried corn to keep them from striving to graze on the autumn-killed grass. The berserker waded through the season-shrunken flood to the opposite bank, where there was further edging of growth and disappeared so well into the screen that Milo, for all his search, could not make the other's hiding place. He and the battle maiden picked their own points of vantage. Waiting plucked at the nerves of a man. Milo knew that. Also, it could well be that they were engaged in a fruitless task. He did not doubt Dean's seeing of the night before, but those who thought their party could have ventured on straight away and not upstream until, of course, they came across no further evidence of a trail. Then they would cast back action that would take time. Here in the brush, he and Yvel were not under the wind, which carried a chilling bite. It blew from the north, promising worse to come. However, there was a pale showing of sun to defy the gray clouding. 2 men plus 1 worker of some magic. Milo spoke more to himself than to the girl. In fact, she, too, had withdrawn so well into the brush he had only a general idea where she now rested. The men would be easy enough to handle. It was the worker of magic that bothered Milo. Nail, as were Berserker, had certain spells of his own. Whether those could even in part counteract the dark blot Dean had read in the flames was another and graver matter. The longer they waited, the more he hoped that their turn north upstream had indeed thrown the followers off their trail. He saw a flicker of color in the air. Speeding downstream, Frida now had released the pseudo-dragon. Milo silently raged at the rash action of the berserker. Any worker of magic had only to sight the creature, or even sense it, and they would be revealed. He knew that the berserkers, because of their very nature, were impetuous, given to sudden wild attacks, and sometimes unable to contain the rage they unconsciously generated. Perhaps Nail had reached that point and was deliberately baiting the trailers into action. Then Milo looked down at the bracelet on his wrist. There was a warmth there. A beginning stir of dice. He tried to shut out of his mind all else but what the wizard had impressed upon him. That concentration could change the arbitrary roll of the dice. Concentrate he did. Dice spun, slowed. Milo concentrated, another turn, another, so much he did achieve. He was certain by his efforts. Moving with the utmost caution, the swordsman arose, drew his blade, and brought his shield into place. Now he could hear sounds, clucking of hooves against the stones and gravel of the shrunken river. 2 men rode into view. They bore weapons, but neither swords nor long daggers were at the ready, nor was the crossbow strapped to the saddle of the second under his hand. It would seem that they had no suspicion of any danger ahead. 2 men. Where was the third? Though a magic worker. Milo had hoped that Nail would not attack until they learned that. However, it was Yvel who moved out. Instead of drawn steel, she held in her hands a hoop woven of grass. This she raised to her mouth, blowing through it. He saw her lips shape a distant puff, though there came a shrill whistling out of the air overhead, seemingly directly above the two riders. They halted, nor did their leader, who had been bending forward to mark the sign of any trail, straighten up. It was as if both men and mount had been suddenly frozen in the same position they held at the beginning of the sound. Milo recognized the second rider, Hellegret, the beast dealer they had met in the marketplace in Greyhawk. His companion wore half-armor, mainly male. His head was covered by one of those caps ending in a dangling streamer at the back, which might be speedily drawn forward and looped about the throat and lower part of the face. This suggested that his employment was not to that of a fighter, but rather a skulker, perhaps even a thief. The crossbow was not his only armament. At his belt hung a weapon that was neither dagger nor sword in length, but between the two. That he used it skillfully, Milo had no doubt. There was a limit to the spell Yvel had pronounced, Milo knew, but though they had so immobilized two of the enemy, which was an improvement on the outright ambush, there was still that third. Milo waited, tense and ready, for his answer to Yvel's action. Nefrita was heard before she was seen, her hissing magnified. Now, with a beat of wings so fast that they could hardly be distinguished, save as a troubling of the air. She came into sight, hung so for a moment, and was gone again downstream. Milo made a quick decision. If the spell vanished, surely Nail and Yvel could, between them, handle the two men in plain sight. It was evident that the pseudo-dragon had located the third member of the party, and was urging that she be followed to that one's hiding place. The swordsman stepped out of the concealment, saw the eyes of the two captives fasten on him, though even their expressions could not change, nor could they turn their heads to watch him. On the other side of the stream, Nail appeared, his axe swinging negligently in one hand, his boar-topped helm crammed so low on his head that its shadow masked his face. He lifted a hand to Milo, and then pointed downstream. Apparently, the same thought had crossed his mind. As Milo twisted and turned among the rocks and bushes, so did the berserker keep pace with him on the other side of the flood, leaving Yvel to guard the prisoners. Seemingly, Nail had no doubts about her ability to do so. Had her spell-casting answer to concentration on her bracelet, thus giving it added force? Milo hoped fervently that it was so. Nail's hand went up to signal a halt. That the wearer possessed senses he could not himself hope to draw upon, Milo was well knew. He drew back into the shadow for one of the wind-tortured trees, watching Nail for all his bulk melt into a pile of rocks and drift. There was no sound of hooves this time to herald the coming of the third rider, but he was now in plain sight, almost as if he had materialized out of the sand and rock. His horse was long-legged, raw-boned, as if it had never had forage enough to fill its lean belly, and the skull-like head it carried droopingly downward. Its eyes burned yellow in a way unlike that of any normal beast. Nor did he who rode it guide it with any reins or bit. Seemingly, it strode onward without any direction from the one crouching on its bony back. The rider, the rusty robe of a druid, frayed to thread fringes at the hem, covered his hunched body. Even the cowl was drawn so far over the forward-poking head as to completely hide his face. Milo waited to catch the hint of corruption that no thing of chaos passing this close could conceal from one vowed into the law. But the frosty air carried no stench. Still, this was not one of law either. Now his beast halted without raising its head, and the cowl-shadowed face turned neither right nor left. The druid's hands were hidden beneath the folds of the long sleeves of his shabby robe. What he might be doing with them, what spells he could so summon or control by concealed gesture alone, the swordsman could not guess. The stranger was not immobilized save by his own will. That much Milo knew, and he was a greater danger than any man in full armor, helpless and weaponless though he now looked. Afrita came into view with one of those sudden darts. Her jaws split open to their widest extent, then closed again to fold of a cowl that she rippled back and off the head of the druid, leaving his brownish bare scalp uncovered. His face writhed into a mask of malice, but he never looked upward at the now hovering pseudo-dragon, or made any move to recover his head. Like all druids, he seemed lost in years, flesh hanging in thin wardles about his neck, his eyes sunken beneath tangled brows that were twice as visible as his otherwise hairless skin. His nose was oddly flattened, with wide-spaced nostrils spreading above a small mouth expressing anger in its puckered folds. To Milo, the man's utter silence and stillness was more of a menace than if he had shouted aloud some runic damnation. The swordsman, more wary than ever of what those hands might be doing beneath those wrinkles of the sleeves. Afrita flew in a circle about the druid's head, hissing vigorously, darting in so close now, and then it would seem that she planned to score at yellow-brown flesh or sink her fangs into nose or ear. Yet the fellow continued to stare downward. Nor did Milo see the least hint of change in either direction of his eyes or the expression of the face. Such intensity could only mean that he was indeed engaged in some magic. The pseudo-dragon apparently had no fear for herself. Perhaps she shared with her great kin their contempt for humankind, but she harassed the druid with purpose. Milo did not doubt. Perhaps, though, the man showed no mark of it. The concentration on what he would do was hindered by the gadfly tactics of the small flyer. Out of the rocks, Nail arose. All one could see of the berserker's face was his square jaw and mouth. The lips of that mouth were drawn well back to express the fangs. When he spoke, there was a grunting tone to his voice, as if he hovered near the change that would take him out of the realm of humankind and into that of the four-footed werewolf. Caravels, when did you crawl forth from the harpy's den you were so proud of? Or did the mage pry you out of a man as a man pries a mussel forth from its shell? It would seem, by the look of you, that you have lost more than your snug hold during the years since our last meeting. Those unblinking eyes continued to hold their forward stare, but for the first time the druid moved. His head turned on his shoulders slowly, almost as if the bone and flesh were rusted and firmly set, so that to break the hold was a very difficult thing. Now, with his head turned far to the left, he bent that last stare on Nail. However, he made no answer. Nail grunted. Lost your tongue also, dabbler in spells? It never served you too well, if I rightly remember. Now, while his attention was fixed on Nail, Milo leaped. He had sheathed his sword slowly so as to make no sound. What he was about to do might well mean his life, but something within him urged his action, as if some fate worse than just death might follow if he did not try. He gained the side of the bony horse in that one leap. His mail-mitted hand rose, almost without his actually willing it, to catch the near arm of the druid. It was like clasping an iron bar as he swung his full weight to pull the arm toward him. By a surge of strength he did not know he could produce, Milo dragged apart those hidden hands, though the druid did not lose his position on the horse. Ah! Now the head had swiveled about. The eyes tried to catch the swordsman's. The other hand came into view, the sleeve falling back and away. It clawed with fingers that were nearer to the long-nailed talons, swooped at Milo's face, his eyes. Between him and that awful gaze swept Afrita. The pseudo-dragon snapped at the descending hand with a faster movement than Milo could have made. A gash appeared in the flesh. Dark blood followed the line of it. The arm Milo still held jerked and fought against him. It was as if he strove to imprison something as strong as a North-forged sword governed by a relentless will. Afrita dove again at the other hand. For the first time the druid flinched, not from the swordsman, but from the pseudo-dragon's attack. It was as if his will now locked on the other, smaller opponent. In Milo's grasp, the right arm went limp, so suddenly he near lost his balance. His hand slid down the arm, which was no longer crooked against the body, but hung straight-sleeved, hidden, hand pointing at the gravel. From that hand fell an object. And we'll find out what that object is next time. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the near future.